There are three fundamental truths in this world: death, taxes, and the unholy power of a homeowners association. I had managed to blissfully ignore the third one for the first 31 years of my life, living in a series of apartments where the biggest problem was a neighbor who practiced the trombone at 3 a.m. I thought I had escaped. I thought I had won. I bought a house. It wasn't a palace. It was a 600-square-foot box of beige vinyl siding plopped in the middle of a development called Whispering Pines, a name that was patently false advertising. The only things that whispered were the neighbors, and the only pines were the sad little saplings planted at HOA mandated intervals along the sidewalk, each one staked with military precision. Still, it was my box. My mortgage, my lawn to mow, my sovereign territory. After years of landlords telling me I couldn't even paint a wall without forfeiting my security deposit and a kidney, the freedom was intoxicating. The first week, I walked around naked, played heavy metal at a volume that rattled the windows, and ate ice cream directly from the carton for dinner. It was glorious. But the real symbol of my newfound liberty, the true monument to my emancipation from rental tyranny, was waiting in a cardboard box on my front porch. Floodlights. Not just any floodlights. I'm talking about the Pro Lumen 9000X series. The online ad boasted stadium-grade illumination and featured a picture of a guy who looked like a Navy SEAL giving a thumbs up. The reviews were stellar, filled with comments like, "My backyard is now visible from the International Space Station," and "The deer that used to eat my petunias have developed anxiety disorders and moved to another state." This was exactly what I wanted. My backyard was a dark, amorphous blob at night, a perfect staging ground for, I assumed, clandestine raccoon fight clubs and squirrel-led insurgency planning. Security was part of the justification, sure, but mostly I just wanted to flip a switch and feel the power of 1,000 suns at my command. Because I could. Because no one could tell me not to. The installation was a thing of beauty. I spent a Saturday afternoon on a ladder, humming to myself, drilling holes, and wiring up the 2 light units to a switch just inside my back door. They were sleek, white, and looked like they could launch photon torpedoes if necessary. As dusk settled over the oppressively neat cul-de-sac, the moment of truth arrived. I took a deep breath, grinned like an idiot, and flipped the switch. Phoom! The world turned white. My sad patch of grass, the fence, the lonely little oak tree at the back of the property, it was all bathed in a brilliant, unwavering, hospital-grade light. It wasn't just bright. It was an active participant in the visual spectrum. It was the kind of light that didn't just illuminate things, it interrogated them. I could see individual blades of grass, a confused moth twitching on a fence post 50 yards away, and the terrified face of my neighbor's cat, which had been in the middle of a covert poop operation in my flower bed. It froze, caught in the beam like a jewel thief in a heist movie, before rocketing off into the darkness. "Yes," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Perfection." I stood there for a full 10 minutes, basking in the glow of my achievement. My house was a beacon of security in a sea of suburban darkness, a fortress of light. What could possibly go wrong? The next morning, as I was nursing a cup of coffee and enjoying the view of my now cat-free flower bed, the doorbell rang. It was 9:15 a.m., an ungodly hour for any unscheduled social interaction. I padded to the door, expecting a package or perhaps a lost child. Instead, I found her. She was a woman in her mid-50s, with a haircut so severe it looked like it had been done with a laser level. She wore a pristine white polo shirt tucked with ruthless efficiency into a pair of khaki shorts that were creased to a razor's edge. In one hand she held a smartphone, in the other a clipboard. which she clutched with the grim determination of a Viking holding a battle axe. This, I would soon learn, was Carol. "Good morning," she chirped, her smile as thin and tight as a banjo string. "You must be the new owner of 112 Blossom Lane. I'm Carol, the president of the Homeowners Association." "Mark," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "That's me, just trying to settle in." "Wonderful, wonderful," she said, her eyes flicking past me, over my shoulder, and presumably towards my backyard. "We're so glad to have you. I just wanted to pop by and welcome you to Whispering Pines personally." "Appreciate that," I said, already knowing this was not a welcome visit. This was a reconnaissance mission. "It's just that," she began, the smile tightening another notch. "I couldn't help but notice your new fixtures in the back. My husband and I were enjoying a glass of Chardonnay on our patio last night, and we thought perhaps the airport had redirected a runway over our house." I forced a chuckle. "Yeah, they're pretty bright, trying to keep the local raccoon mafia from setting up shop back there." Carol's smile didn't falter, but her eyes turned to little chips of granite. "Of course, security is so important. We all value our peace of mind here. However," and here it came, the pivot, "your fixtures are a tad out of compliance with the community bylaws." She tapped her clipboard. "Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C, Exterior Lighting and Aesthetic Harmony. All exterior lighting must be of a modest lumen count, shielded to prevent light spillage onto neighboring properties, and housed in pre-approved casings." She looked up from the clipboard, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the citation. "Yours, I'm afraid, fail on all 3 counts. The glare, the housing, the sheer intensity of it all." I stared at her. "The housing is white. It's a standard floodlight." "Ah," she said, leaning in conspiratorially. "But is it appliance white or signal white? The bylaws clearly state that all exterior fixtures must be eggshell, gentle fawn, or, with special written permission from the Architectural Review Committee, linen." I had no words. We were in a color swatch-based nightmare. "It's white," I repeated lamely. "I'll have to check the official Pantone chart," she said, making a note on her clipboard. "Regardless, the lumen output is the primary violation. They'll have to be replaced with something more neighborly." She gave me another one of those razor wire smiles. "You'll get an official notice, of course. Just a friendly warning for now. Welcome to the neighborhood." She turned and marched away, her sensible walking shoes making determined, rhythmic thumps on the sidewalk. I stood in my doorway, the coffee in my mug now cold, and watched her go. This wasn't a warning. This was a declaration of war. A war over light, lumens, and the sacred right to choose appliance white. And I, a man who had just tasted true freedom, was not about to surrender. The official notice arrived 2 days later. It was a crisp, cream-colored envelope with the Whispering Pines HOA logo embossed in a tasteful, yet authoritarian, navy blue. Inside, a letter detailed my transgressions in sterile, passionless prose. It cited the bylaw, the date of the offense, and included a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my house taken from Carol's smartphone, with the offending floodlight circled in what looked like blood-red digital ink. I had 14 days to comply. Failure to do so would result in a fine of $50, with subsequent fines to be levied for continued non-compliance. $50. It wasn't the money. I'd have happily paid $50 just to watch that cat get vaporized by the light again. It was the principle. It was the sheer, unadulterated pettiness of it all. This was my land, my castle, my mortgage. No clipboard-wielding tyrant was going to tell me what color my light fixtures could be. That night, I declared my home office a war room. I poured a glass of whiskey, put on some epic movie scores for ambiance, and downloaded the 247-page PDF of the Whispering Pines covenants, conditions, and restrictions. It was a journey into the heart of suburban darkness. The document was a masterpiece of legalese and micromanagement. I learned that my trash cans could not be visible from the street for more than 12 hours. I learned that any basketball hoop had to be a specific brand and model. I discovered that all garden gnomes, should I choose to own one, were required by law to face true north, presumably to not offend the magnetic sensibilities of the earth. It was insane. It was also, I hoped, my ammunition. If Carol could weaponize the bylaws, so could I. I scrolled for hours, my eyes glazing over, searching for a loophole, a contradiction, anything I could use. And then I found it. Tucked away in a section about homeowner responsibilities was Bylaw 15, Section 2, Paragraph A, Homeowner's Duty to Secure Property. It was beautiful. It was vague. It stated that every homeowner had a right and a duty to take reasonable measures to secure their property against theft, vandalism, and other criminal acts. Reasonable measures. Who defined reasonable? I did. I fired up my email. The subject line was a work of art. Inquiry regarding Bylaw 15.2. A, and its synergy with Bylaw 7.4. C. I crafted a meticulously polite, yet drippingly passive-aggressive email to the HOA board, which I knew was just Carol and two of her cronies. I expressed my profound gratitude for their commitment to aesthetic harmony, but also my deep concern for community safety. While I respect and admire the board's dedication to the color gentle fawn, I wrote, I must invoke my rights and responsibilities under Bylaw 15.2. A. Given the recent and alarming news reports of property crime in adjacent communities, here I linked a 3-week-old article about a car being broken into 6 towns over. The installation of high-visibility security lighting is not just a preference, but a reasonable measure to deter potential criminal elements and safeguard my property, and by extension the entire Whispering Pines community. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, taking a triumphant sip of whiskey. The ball was in her court. Let's see her argue against safety. I felt smug. I felt clever. I felt like I had this completely under control. For a week there was nothing but a beautiful, blissful silence. No emails, no clipboard on my porch. I saw Carol giving me the stink eye from across the street while she was power walking. But she didn't approach. I had won. I had beaten the system with its own twisted logic. My superlights continued to blaze nightly, a shining beacon of my victory. Then came the email that changed everything. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from work. I should explain my job. On paper, I'm a remote geospatial analyst for a company called Synaptic Solutions. It sounds fancy, but in reality, it was the most boring job on the planet. I was a government contractor, one of thousands of faceless cogs in a massive machine. My day consisted of logging into a secure portal, looking at satellite images, and tagging things. This is a bridge. This is a commercial building. This is a surprisingly large collection of garden gnomes that are all, I noted with a smirk, facing southwest in flagrant violation of some poor soul's HOA rules. It was mindless, repetitive work that paid the bills and allowed me to work from home in my sweatpants. The email was from a department I'd never even heard of. Asset Integrity Division. The subject line was stark. Mandatory action required, Project Nightingale. Mr., my last name, due to your continued involvement in Project Nightingale, a mandatory home security upgrade is required to protect sensitive government assets located at your designated remote work site. This is a non-negotiable condition of your continued clearance and employment on this project. A team of technical contractors will be in touch within 48 hours to schedule the installation. We appreciate your full cooperation. Regards, Asset Integrity Division. I read it twice. Project Nightingale? I had no idea what that was. I assumed it was just the internal code name for the batch of images I was currently clicking through. And sensitive government assets? They meant my work laptop, a 5-year-old Dell that made a grinding noise like a dying badger whenever I tried to open a spreadsheet. Still, a free upgrade sounded good. Maybe they'd give me a new monitor or one of those fancy ergonomic chairs that cost more than my car. I archived the email, thinking nothing more of it. A free security system to protect my clunky old laptop? Sure, why not? It couldn't possibly be more conspicuous than the floodlights I already had. Oh, what a sweet, naive fool I was. 2 days later, a van pulled into my driveway. It was not a Comcast van, nor was it from some local alarm company. It was a Ford Transit, murdered out in matte black. No logos, no phone number, just tinted windows that seemed to absorb the cheerful morning light and crush it into nothing. 2 people emerged, a man and a woman. They were both dressed in practical dark blue work pants and plain black polo shirts. The man was built like a vending machine, with a square jaw and a completely unreadable expression. The woman was leaner, with her dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, and she held a ruggedized tablet like it was a part of her arm. They moved with a quiet, unnerving efficiency. The man, whose name I learned was Miller, had a voice that sounded like gravel being poured over concrete. "Mark, my last name? We're the technical contractors." Yeah, that's me," I said, trying to sound casual. "You guys from Synaptic? Here for the asset upgrade?" I made little air quotes with my fingers. Miller did not seem to find it amusing. "We're here to harden your residence against unauthorized observation and intrusion," he stated, his eyes scanning the front of my house, the roofline, the windows. It was the kind of look a wolf gives a sheep if the wolf was also a licensed structural engineer. The woman, Diaz, was already tapping away at her tablet, a satellite view of my property on the screen. "Perimeter is clear," she said to Miller, not me. "Standard suburban lot, single-family dwelling, wood frame construction, multiple points of ingress. Suboptimal?" "Suboptimal?" I asked. "It's a house. It has doors and windows. That's kind of the point." Diaz looked at me for the first time. Her eyes were dark and serious. "Doors and windows are vulnerabilities," she said, before returning her attention to the tablet. They did a full walk-around of the property. I tagged along like a nervous puppy, trying to make small talk. "So, you guys do this a lot? Must be interesting work." Miller just grunted. Diaz offered, "We ensure operational security for distributed assets." It was like talking to a pair of sentient instruction manuals. When we got to my backyard, Miller stopped and stared at my glorious Pro-Lumen 9000X floodlights. A flicker of something, maybe curiosity, maybe disdain, crossed his face. "So," I said, puffing my chest out a little, "I already took care of the lighting situation. Pretty bright, huh? Got into a bit of a tiff with the HOA over them, actually." Miller looked from the lights to me and back again. "The existing fixtures are inadequate," he said, his voice flat and final. "We'll be replacing them." My blood ran cold. Whoa, hold on," I stammered, my bravado evaporating. "About the floodlights. It's a whole thing. A situation. With a lady named Carol. She has bylaws and color swatches." Diaz looked up from her tablet, her expression unchanged. "Compliance with local ordinances is secondary to federal security protocols, sir. Please clear the area." And just like that, I was no longer the king of my castle. I was a bystander on my own lawn, watching as these 2 mysterious agents of whatever the hell began unloading cases of equipment from their black van. This was not going to be a new video doorbell. This was something else. Entirely. I retreated to my living room window, a prisoner in my own home, and watched the chaos unfold. It was a masterclass in efficiency. They didn't work like any contractors I'd ever hired. There was no loud music, no idle chit-chat, no long smoke breaks. They moved with a silent, synchronized purpose that was both impressive and deeply terrifying. First, they removed my beloved ProLumen 9000X units. I felt a genuine pang of loss as Miller disconnected them with a simple snip of his wire cutters and set them on the grass like discarded toys. Then, they started installing the new hardware. The units they pulled from the padded cases were nothing like my simple floodlights. They were sleek, matte black devices, angular and vaguely menacing. They looked less like light fixtures and more like something that would be mounted on the wing of a stealth drone. Diaz scaled a ladder with a tool belt that looked like it belonged to Batman, while Miller directed her from below, consulting his tablet. My anxiety was growing exponentially. I was pacing my living room, muttering to myself. "This is fine. It's fine. They're just security lights. More compliant ones, maybe. Maybe they're gentle fawn-colored and have a soft, inviting glow." Then Miller saw me through the window and strode to my back door. I opened it cautiously. "Sir," he began, in his monotone drone, "I need to brief you on the functionality of the new illumination and surveillance platforms." Illumination and what? "They're not just lights," he explained, as if talking to a child. "Each unit contains a multi-spectrum array. High-intensity LED for standard visual deterrence, plus a full-range infrared illuminator for low-light observation. They are networked to a central processor we're installing in your utility closet." My jaw was on the floor. "Infrared?" "Correct. The system is fully automated. It features motion tracking with predictive behavioral analysis. It can differentiate between animal and human subjects and track multiple targets simultaneously." He pointed to a small, almost invisible lens on the unit Diaz was now calibrating. "That's the high-resolution optical camera, 4K resolution. Next to it is the thermal imager. It can detect a human heat signature from over 500 meters. I just stared at him. 500 meters. That was halfway across the entire development. My house was being outfitted with the surveillance capabilities of a small nation-state. And, he added, as a terrifying afterthought, in the event of a sustained perimeter breach, the system is equipped with a low-decibel audio deterrent. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It emits a targeted, variable-frequency sonic wave that is extremely unpleasant," he said. "It causes disorientation and nausea without creating a public disturbance. Effective, but discreet." Discreet was not the word I would have chosen. My house was now a high-tech fortress capable of seeing in the dark, tracking my neighbors, and making intruders want to vomit. I was simultaneously horrified and, I have to admit, a little bit thrilled. And that's when I saw her. Carol. She was marching across her perfectly manicured lawn, her face a mask of righteous fury. She had seen the black van, the activity, the installation of new, even more illegal-looking fixtures. Her hands were on her hips, her power-walking stride full of purpose. She was a khaki-clad guided missile, and my backyard was ground zero. "Oh no," I breathed. Miller followed my gaze. He saw the approaching storm. "Sir," he said, his voice unchanging, "I suggest you go inside." But it was too late. I was frozen in place, a spectator at my own execution. "What is the meaning of this?" Carol shouted from 20 feet away, not even bothering with a greeting. Her voice cut through the quiet afternoon air like a chainsaw. "I gave you a formal warning. Those are not on the approved list. They're not even a color." "Carol, hi," I said weakly. "It's complicated. These are work people. It's a mandatory upgrade." She stormed right up to the edge of my patio, her eyes blazing. "I don't care if they're from the Pope himself. They are in violation of a dozen covenants. I need to see your work order. I need to see a city permit. And I demand to know the name of this company." Miller turned to face her. He was a foot taller and about a foot wider than her, a solid wall of impassive muscle. He looked down at her, his face a complete blank. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and calm, "for your own safety, I need you to return to your property. This is an active federal government worksite." Carol actually scoffed. A real, audible scoff of disbelief. "Federal government? Don't be ridiculous. You're installing light fixtures. I am the president of this homeowners association, and I have jurisdiction here." This was it. The unstoppable force meeting the immovable object. Miller didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He just tilted his head slightly. "Ma'am, your jurisdiction ends where national security begins. Now, please step away from the work area." "National security?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with indignation. "You're telling me this man," she pointed a trembling finger at me, "is a matter of national security? He can't even sort his recycling correctly. I've seen his bins." Defeated by Miller's stonewalling and my own apparent incompetence at waste disposal, Carol did the only thing a person like her could do when faced with authority she didn't recognize. She escalated. She whipped out her phone, her thumb jabbing at the screen with fury. "That's it! I'm calling the police," she announced. "We'll see what they have to say about these federal protocols." My stomach performed a series of complex gymnastic maneuvers. The police, of course. Now I was going to be arrested. I was going to be the lead story on the local news. Local man's war with HOA ends in SWAT team standoff. Miller and Diaz didn't even flinch. Diaz continued calibrating her thermal imager as if Carol didn't exist. 10 minutes later, a squad car rolled silently up to my curb. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a thick mustache, and a weary look in his eyes that suggested he'd seen every stupid thing humanity had to offer. This was Officer Dave. The other, Officer Ramirez, was younger, sharper, and looked like he was still trying to take the job seriously. Carol practically ran to them, launching into a breathless, high-pitched account of my crimes against suburbia. "Sir, and they refuse to show me a permit. They claim it's national security. Can you believe the nerve? They're installing some kind of death rays on his house." Officer Dave sighed the sigh of a man who was contemplating retirement in a cabin with no neighbors for 100 miles. He ambled over to where we were standing. "Folks," he said, his voice tired. "Big day in Whispering Pines, huh?" "Sir, ma'am." He nodded at Miller and Diaz. "We've had a complaint about unauthorized construction. Can you tell me what's going on here?" Diaz, ever the professional, finally ceased her work. She turned and walked over to him. "Good afternoon, officer. We're conducting a federally mandated security installation." "Right," Dave said, unimpressed. "And do you have a city permit for that?" "Permits are waived under Homeland Security Directive 12, Diaz said calmly. Dave and Ramirez exchanged a look. This was clearly not in their standard training manual for dealing with disputes over lawn ornaments. "Directive 12, huh?" Dave said, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "Look, I don't know anything about that. All I know is this lady is upset, and you're installing— What are those, anyway?" Diaz didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and made a call. She listened for a moment, her face impassive. Then she held the phone out to Officer Dave. "My supervisor would like to have a word with you." Officer Dave looked annoyed, but he took the phone. "Hello? This is Officer Dave, Northwood Police Department." I watched, mesmerized, as a slow-motion transformation occurred on the officer's face. His annoyance melted away, replaced by confusion. The confusion gave way to wide-eyed understanding. His posture, which had been relaxed and casual, snapped ramrod straight. He looked like a private who had just been caught chewing gum by a 4-star general. His side of the conversation was short and incredibly respectful. "Yes, sir." A pause. "No, sir. I was not aware of that." A longer pause as he stared at my house, then at me with a completely new expression. "I understand completely, sir." Another pause. "Yes, sir, it will not happen again. I apologize for the intrusion." He handed the phone back to Diaz with the reverence of someone returning a holy relic. He cleared his throat and turned to Carol, who was watching with a smug, expectant look on her face, assuming her victory was imminent. Officer Dave's entire demeanor had changed. He was no longer a weary local cop. He was a man who had just been given an order he had no intention of disobeying. "Ma'am," he said to Carol, his voice low and serious, "this is a private federal matter. There's nothing the police can do here." Carol's jaw dropped. "A private matter? They are breaking the law, our laws." "Carol," Dave said, taking a step closer and dropping his voice even lower, so only she and I could hear. "I can't explain it, but for your own good and for mine, I am telling you to go home. Draw your blinds and forget you ever saw any of this. Stop taking pictures, stop calling people, just stop." With that, he tipped his hat to Miller and Diaz, gave me a look that was equal parts fear and bewilderment, and then he and Ramirez got back in their squad car and drove away without a backward glance. The silence they left behind was deafening. Carol stood on the edge of my lawn, her face pale, her mouth slightly agape. She had brought the full weight of the law to bear, and the law had taken one look, said nope, and sprinted in the other direction. She had been utterly, comprehensively defeated. Without another word, she turned and shuffled back to her own house, not with the triumphant march of a victor, but with the stunned, stumbling gait of a survivor. Miller and Diaz went back to work as if nothing had happened. I was left standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. My little spat with the HOA had somehow spiraled into an incident that required a quiet word from a shadowy figure in Washington, D.C., to make the local police disappear. That night, my house felt different. The new lights didn't just come on at dusk, they activated. There was a soft, almost inaudible hum, and then the area around my house was bathed in a crisp, clear light that was somehow less obnoxious than my old ones, but infinitely more intimidating. It didn't spill everywhere. It created a perfect, sharp-edged perimeter of illumination. My yard wasn't just lit, it was secured. My phone buzzed incessantly. It was the neighborhood group text. Frank from #118. Did anyone see the cops at Mark's place? Susan from #124. And that black van? Looked like something out of the X-Files. Bill from #110. Carol tried to tell me he's some kind of secret agent. She looked spooked. I was a local myth, a legend, and I had absolutely no idea why. My panic had subsided, replaced by a profound and terrifying sense of confusion. I sat in my home office, staring at my work laptop. That dumb, slow, badger-grinding Dell. What in God's name was I actually doing every day? What was Project Nightingale? My phone rang. It was a blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A voice, calm, deep, and radiating an authority that made Officer Dave's demeanor shift suddenly make perfect sense, spoke from the other end. "Mr. My last name? This is Director Jones. I trust the installation was completed to your satisfaction." I swallowed hard. "Director? Yeah, I guess. Look, I have to ask. I understand you had a minor complication with local enforcement and a neighborhood liaison today," he said, completely ignoring my attempt to ask a question. The word liaison was delivered with a hint of dry amusement. "A minor complication?" I squeaked, my voice an octave higher than usual. "I have an HOA president who now thinks I'm Jason Bourne, and 2 cops who looked like they'd seen a ghost. What the hell is going on? What is my job? I just tag bridges on satellite photos." There was a soft, dry chuckle on the other end of the line. It was not a comforting sound. "You do more than you know, son," Jones said. "Your pattern recognition work, your ability to spot anomalies that 99.9% of analysts miss, it's invaluable. Let's just say you're very, very good at finding needles in a very large haystack. And some of those needles are critically important." I was silent, trying to process this. "Me? A needle finder?" "The hardware at your residence is non-negotiable," he continued, his tone shifting back to business. "It ensures the integrity of your work and the security of the data stream. Do not discuss this with anyone. Do not interfere with the equipment. We will handle the HOA problem. Just keep doing your job, mister, my last name. You're doing a great service for your country." The line went dead. I sat there in the eerie, perfect light of my new surveillance system, staring at my laptop with a newfound sense of absolute dread and bewildering importance. I wasn't a data monkey. I was a cog. A tiny, unwitting, but apparently mission-critical cog in the vast, terrifying machine of national security. And my war with Carol was about to enter its final, surreal chapter. The flyer appeared on every door in Whispering Pines the next morning. It was printed on angry, bright red paper. "Emergency HOA meeting, urgent. Topic: unsanctioned, hostile, and potentially illegal installations at 112 Blossom Lane. Tonight, 7 p.m., Community Center. Your property values are at stake." Carol wasn't taking her defeat lying down. The police may have abandoned her, but she still had one weapon left in her arsenal: public shaming and mob rule. She was going all in. And I knew, with a sinking feeling in my gut, that I had to be there. I couldn't just hide. Mr. Jones had said they would handle it, but I had no idea what that meant. My only plan was to show up, armed with nothing but my sarcasm and the vague, unprovable threat of the United States government. The community center was a sterile beige room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and quiet desperation. When I walked in at 7:02 p.m., the place was packed. Every homeowner with a grievance and too much time on their hands was there. The air was thick with whispered speculation. I saw Frank from hash 118 and Susan from hash 124, who both gave me nervous, curious looks. I took a seat in the back, trying to look as nonchalant as possible, which is difficult when you feel like a secret agent in a bad sitcom. At the front of the room was a podium and a large projection screen. Carol stood beside it, looking grim and determined. She had traded her polo shirt and shorts for a severe-looking gray pantsuit. She looked like she was about to prosecute a war criminal. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice resonating with manufactured gravity. "I have called this emergency meeting because our community is facing an unprecedented threat." She clicked a button on a remote. The screen flickered to life, showing a title slide. "The Siege of Blossom Lane, a presentation by Carol, her last name." Oh, this was going to be epic. What followed was the most unhinged, meticulously documented PowerPoint presentation I have ever witnessed. Carol, it turned out, had not gone home and drawn her blinds as Officer Dave had suggested. She had doubled down on surveillance. She had slides with photos of the black van, its license plate circled and labeled Unknown. She had slides with telephoto shots of Miller and Diaz, labeled Unidentified Agents. She had multiple, grainy slides of the new death ray floodlights, taken from what must have been her bedroom window. There were daytime shots, nighttime shots, and even an artistic black and white one that was probably meant to convey a sense of dystopian dread. "These are not mere lights, my friends," she declared, pacing in front of the screen like a general rallying her troops. "These are weapons-grade surveillance devices, installed without permits, without oversight, and in flagrant violation of every rule we hold dear." She clicked to a new slide. A complex, legal-looking flowchart connecting my property to a dozen different violated bylaws, from aesthetic harmony to structural modifications. "This is about more than just light pollution," she thundered. "This is about a hostile actor in our midst, an individual who believes he is above the law, above our shared community values. He brought in mysterious operatives. He intimidated our local police force into submission. Who is this man?" All eyes turned to me. I gave a little wave. "We must send a message," Carol continued, her voice rising to a crescendo. "A message that we will not be bullied. I am asking the board tonight to levy the maximum possible fine, $1,000, and to immediately authorize our legal counsel to place a lien on his property until these abominations are removed." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. They were eating it up. They were ready to storm my house with pitchforks and tiki torches, as long as the tiki torches were on the HOA's pre-approved list, of course. I was sunk. My sarcasm was no match for this level of organized insanity. I was trying to formulate some kind of witty, doomed-to-fail rebuttal when it happened. The main lights in the community center flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Carol stopped mid-rant. "What's going on?" someone yelled. Then, through the large windows at the back of the room, a new light source appeared. It was a brilliant, pure white light, focused with pinpoint accuracy on the community center's main entrance. It was my floodlights, but they weren't just on. They had swiveled and aimed themselves like a pair of theatrical spotlights, creating a dramatic, expectant entrance. The doors swung open silently. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the blinding light, were 3 figures. 2 large, broad-shouldered shapes, and 1 leaner, central one. As they stepped inside, the room's emergency lights flickered on, casting a dim, eerie glow on the scene. It was Mr. Jones, flanked by Agents Miller and Diaz. Jones was wearing a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, his silver hair neatly combed. He radiated a calm, absolute authority that made Carol's manufactured outrage look like a child's tantrum. The entire room fell into a stunned, breathless silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Or, more appropriately for this neighborhood, a blade of grass growing to a non-compliant height. Mr. Jones walked calmly down the center aisle, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the linoleum floor. He walked right up to the podium, gave Carol a polite, dismissive nod, and gently moved her aside. He didn't push her. He just sort of displaced her with his aura of importance. He scanned the room of slack-jawed homeowners, his expression calm and professional. "Good evening," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "My name is Director Jones. Please, don't be alarmed. I won't take much of your time." He turned his head slightly and looked directly at Carol, who was standing beside the podium looking utterly bewildered. "President Carol, is it?" he asked. She just nodded, her mouth slightly open. "I want to commend you," he said, his voice sincere. "Your vigilance, your attention to detail, it's exactly what we count on from concerned citizens. You noticed something that was out of the ordinary, and you reported it. That's commendable." Carol's face was a beautiful, chaotic canvas of conflicting emotions. She had been ready for a fight, for condemnation. Praise, especially from this intimidating, powerful man, was a weapon she had no defense against. Jones continued, addressing the room, but still looking at her. The equipment at Mr. My Last Name. S residence is part of a federally mandated security protocol. I can't go into the specifics, of course, but I can assure you that it is part of a crucial public-private partnership. The work done at that location is essential to the stability and security of regional infrastructure. He placed a thin, black folder on the podium. It was embossed with a silver eagle seal that looked incredibly official and terrifying. I understand this has caused some concern, which is why I felt it was important to come here and clear the air myself. He then turned his full attention back to Carol, his expression softening into one of benevolent appreciation. We need more people like you, Carol. People who pay attention. People who aren't afraid to ask questions. In fact, he reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a laminated certificate. It had a gold foil border and more eagles on it. The Department of Homeland Security's Community Outreach Program would like to recognize your civic-mindedness with this Community Vigilance Liaison Award. He held it out to her. This was the moment. This was the final, fatal blow. Carol stared at the certificate as if it were the Ark of the Covenant. Her brain, which had been revving at 1,000 RPMs on a fuel of pure indignation, suddenly had its transmission dropped out. The praise from an authority figure far greater than any she had ever dreamed of, combined with the sheer, unassailable intimidation of the moment, caused a catastrophic system failure. Her face went blank. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. Her mouth opened, closed, and then opened again, but no sound emerged. She robotically reached out and took the certificate with a trembling hand. She looked down at it, then back up at Mr. Jones. She was frozen. Utterly, completely, and magnificently frozen. Her entire operating system had crashed. Mr. Jones gave a tight, professional smile to the silent, stunned room. He looked over at me, sitting in the back, and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. A nod that said, "Problem handled." Then, as silently as they had arrived, he and his agents turned and walked out, leaving a room full of bewildered suburbanites and their catatonic, award-winning HOA president behind. The meeting dissolved without another word. People just quietly got up and filed out, avoiding eye contact with me, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and a newfound deep respect. I was no longer just the weird new guy. I was the guy with the friends in dark suits and a direct line to the people who hand out eagle-crested certificates. I walked home under the watchful, invisible eyes of my thermal imagers. The world felt cleaner, quieter. The next morning, I saw Carol outside, watering her prize-winning petunias. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. I saw a flicker of pure, primal terror in her gaze before she dropped her hose and practically sprinted back inside her house. She never spoke to me again. She never made eye contact again. A week later, a notice went out that she had stepped down as HOA president due to personal reasons. I was in my office a few days after the meeting, clicking on satellite photos of what looked like a shipyard, when an email popped up. It was from Synaptic Solutions' finance department. The subject? Project Nightingale, discretionary bonus. I opened it. My eyes widened. They had awarded me a significant inconvenience bonus and a 20% pay raise for my continued excellence and for facilitating enhanced operational security. I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin spreading across my face. I looked out the window at my quiet, peaceful street. My lawn was now definitely an inch over the regulation height. My trash cans had been out for 13 hours. And a new garden gnome I'd bought online, a hilarious one of a zombie climbing out of the ground, was facing due east, a blatant act of defiance against the planet's magnetic field and the ghost of Carol's regime. So, you want to know how to win a war with your HOA? You could memorize the bylaws. You could hire a lawyer. You could try to reason with them. Or you could do what I did. Accidentally become a low-level, mission-critical cog in the nation's domestic security apparatus. It's a bit of a niche solution, I'll admit. But I have to say, the results are spectacular. The raccoons are gone, my petunias are safe, and a beautiful, blissful anarchy has settled over 112 Blossom Lane. Absolute victory.